Hey everyone, welcome back to Mia and Simon English Podcast. I'm Mia.
And I'm Simon. And today's topic is a little intense, honestly. Fix your life before it's too late.
That's a heavy title.
It is, but I think it's something we all quietly think about sometimes, even if we don't say it out loud.
Before we start, if you're new here, this podcast helps you learn real, natural English through simple, everyday conversations. So make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss new episodes.
All right, Mia, let's start with something honest. Is there something in your life right now that you know you should fix, but you keep avoiding?
Oh, that's a direct question right away.
I like starting strong.
Okay, honestly, yes. My sleep schedule is a mess. I know it's affecting my mood and my energy, but I keep telling myself I'll fix it next week.
How long have you been saying next week?
Honestly, probably 6 months.
6 months of next week.
I know, it sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud.
It's not ridiculous, actually. I think almost everyone has something like that. Some small fix they keep postponing.
What about you? Is there something you've been avoiding fixing?
Definitely. I have some old friendships that quietly faded because I never reached out. And every time I think about it, I feel this small guilt.
But you never actually message them.
No, because part of me thinks it's been too long now. It would be awkward.
That's such a common trap, though. The longer you wait, the harder it feels to start again.
Exactly. And that's kind of the whole idea behind today's topic. Small things left unfixed don't stay small. They quietly grow heavier over time.
Right, it's not like the problem stays the same size while we wait.
No, it usually gets bigger, or more complicated, or more emotionally loaded.
So why do we wait even when we know that?
I think it's because fixing something requires facing it directly. And facing things is uncomfortable.
So avoidance feels safer in the moment, even if it's worse in the long run.
Exactly. Our brains are very good at choosing short-term comfort over long-term benefit.
That's such an important pattern to notice. Short-term comfort, long-term cost.
Right, and it applies to so many areas: health, relationships, finances, even our own personal growth.
Let's talk about health for a second, since that's a big one for a lot of people.
Yes, health is a perfect example. People often ignore small symptoms, small changes, small warning signs.
Because those small signs don't feel urgent yet.
Exactly. And by the time they do feel urgent, the problem is often much harder to fix.
That's honestly a little scary to think about.
It is, but I think it's important to say clearly, not to create fear, but to create motivation.
What's the difference between fear-based motivation and healthy motivation?
I think fear says something terrible will happen if you don't act. Healthy motivation says acting now protects the life you actually want.
So it's not about panic, it's about awareness.
Exactly. Awareness that today's small actions shape tomorrow's bigger reality.
This makes me think about relationships too, honestly, not just health.
Definitely. Relationships often get slowly neglected in the same quiet way.
Right, nobody decides I'm going to ruin this friendship. It just fades from lack of attention.
Exactly. Small neglect, repeated over time, becomes a much bigger distance eventually.
And by the time you notice the distance, it feels almost too big to cross.
Which brings us right back to today's title, Before It's Too Late.
It's not really about sudden disasters. It's about slow, quiet neglect that adds up.
Exactly. And I think understanding that shift changes how urgently we should treat small things.
I want to talk more about specific areas of life people tend to neglect the most and why.
Okay, so which areas do you think people neglect the most, based on what we've talked about so far?
I think health is definitely one of the biggest ones, especially mental health.
Say more about that.
Well, physical symptoms are at least visible sometimes, but mental health struggles are often completely invisible until they become overwhelming.
That's so true. People can seem fine on the outside for a long time while struggling deeply inside.
Right, and because it's invisible, it's easy to keep postponing dealing with it.
There's no obvious deadline pushing you to act, unlike a physical injury that clearly needs attention.
Exactly. Mental health neglect is quiet, which makes it dangerously easy to ignore.
What do you think stops people from addressing it earlier?
I think stigma plays a huge role. Many people still feel embarrassed to admit they're struggling emotionally.
Right. There's this idea that struggling mentally means you're weak somehow.
Exactly. Even though that's completely untrue, everyone struggles at some point. It's part of being human.
I think another factor is simply not knowing where to start. Fixing something invisible feels vague and overwhelming.
That's true. With physical health, go to a doctor. With mental health, it can feel less clear.
Right, but even starting with one honest conversation with a friend or a professional can be that first small step.
Exactly. It doesn't need to be a huge, dramatic fix all at once.
Okay, what's another area people tend to neglect?
I think finances, definitely. So many people avoid even looking at their own spending or savings.
That's such a common one. Financial avoidance.
Right. People would rather not open the bank app than face uncomfortable numbers.
It's almost like ignoring it makes it feel less real temporarily.
Exactly. But the numbers don't disappear just because you're not looking at them.
They usually get worse, actually, especially with debt or unclear spending habits.
Right. Small, unclear spending today can quietly build into a much bigger problem later.
This connects perfectly to what we said earlier, small neglect becoming bigger neglect over time.
Exactly the same pattern, just applied to money instead of health or relationships.
What about personal growth, like skills, education, or career direction?
Oh, that's a big one too. So many people feel stuck in careers that don't fulfill them, but never take steps to change.
Why do you think that happens so often?
I think fear of the unknown plays a huge role. Staying stuck feels safer than risking a big change.
Even if staying stuck is quietly making someone unhappy every single day.
Exactly. Familiar unhappiness can feel safer than unfamiliar uncertainty, strangely enough.
That's such an interesting way to put it. We choose known discomfort over unknown possibility.
Right, and I think that choice often happens without us even consciously deciding it. It just becomes a habit of staying still.
So inaction itself becomes the default choice without ever feeling like an active decision.
Exactly. And that's honestly one of the most dangerous parts of neglect. It doesn't feel like a choice, so it never gets questioned.
This makes me think about the emotional cost of all this neglect too, not just the practical cost.
What do you mean?
Well, beyond the actual problems like debt or poor health, there's also this constant low-level stress of knowing something's unfixed.
Oh, that's so true. Even when I'm not actively thinking about my sleep schedule, there's this quiet tension underneath everything.
Exactly. Unresolved problems create a kind of mental noise, even when we're not directly focused on them.
So, neglect isn't just about the problem itself, it's about the constant low-level stress of carrying it unresolved.
Exactly. And I think that hidden stress affects our overall happiness more than we realize.
I want to talk next about what actually helps people start fixing these things instead of continuing to postpone them.
Okay, so what actually helps someone start fixing something they've been avoiding for a long time?
I think the first thing is shrinking the task down to something almost embarrassingly small.
What do you mean by embarrassingly small?
Like, instead of fix my entire sleep schedule, it becomes go to bed 15 minutes earlier tonight.
That does sound almost too small to matter.
That's exactly the point, though. Small enough that there's no excuse not to do it.
So the goal isn't a dramatic transformation right away.
No, definitely not. Dramatic transformations usually fail because they're too overwhelming to maintain.
Right. This connects to something we talked about before, the tiny step idea from our mouth training conversation.
Exactly the same principle here. Tiny actions are much easier to actually start and repeat.
Okay, what's another thing that helps people begin fixing neglected areas of life?
I think removing judgment from the process really helps too.
What do you mean by that?
Well, a lot of people delay fixing things because they're ashamed of how long they've ignored it.
Right, like feeling embarrassed that it took 6 months to even think about sleep.
Exactly, and that shame actually makes starting even harder, not easier.
So shame becomes another barrier on top of the original problem.
Exactly. It adds emotional weight that has nothing to do with actually solving the issue.
So how do you remove that shame from the process?
I think reminding yourself that today is a new starting point, regardless of how long you waited before.
Right. The past delay doesn't have to define the next step.
Exactly. You can't change how long you waited, but you can absolutely change what you do starting now.
That's such a freeing way to think about it. No blame, just forward motion.
Exactly. Blame keeps you stuck. Forward motion actually creates change.
Okay, what about accountability? Does having other people involved help with fixing neglected areas?
Definitely. I think accountability makes a huge difference for a lot of people.
How so?
Well, telling someone I'm going to fix my sleep schedule creates a small social commitment.
Right, it's harder to quietly quit something when someone else knows about it.
Exactly. And even just checking in with that person occasionally creates gentle pressure to keep going.
I think this applies to financial goals too, honestly. Telling a friend about a savings goal makes it feel more real.
Exactly. Accountability turns a private, easy-to-ignore goal into something slightly more public and harder to abandon.
What about self-accountability, though? Not everyone wants to share personal goals with others.
That's true, and I think tracking progress yourself can work too, even something simple like a notebook or an app.
Right, seeing small progress written down can be really motivating.
Exactly. It turns invisible effort into something visible and trackable.
Okay, what about setbacks? What happens when someone starts fixing something but then falls back into old habits?
I think setbacks are actually completely normal, not a sign of failure.
But they can feel really discouraging in the moment.
They can, definitely, but I think the key is not letting one setback become a complete stop.
How do you prevent that?
I think it helps to see setbacks as part of the process, not the end of the process.
So instead of I failed, I'm back to zero, it becomes I paused and now I'm continuing again.
Exactly that shift in language actually changes how people respond to their own setbacks.
That's such a small change in wording, but it clearly has a big emotional effect.
Exactly, because starting over feels discouraging, but continuing feels much more manageable.
This whole approach feels much more compassionate than the usual harsh just fix it advice.
Exactly, compassion actually creates more consistent action than harshness ever does.
I want to talk next about how someone knows which area of life to focus on first, since there's often more than one neglected thing at once. So if someone has multiple neglected areas at once, health, finances, relationships, how do they know where to start?
That's such a common problem, honestly, feeling overwhelmed by too many things needing attention at the same time.
Right, it can feel paralyzing, like you don't even know where to begin.
I think one helpful approach is asking which area is causing the most daily stress right now.
So, starting with whatever creates the most immediate relief.
Exactly, because fixing that one area often creates energy and confidence to tackle the next area.
That makes sense. Small wins building momentum for bigger challenges.
Exactly. It's not about fixing everything at once, it's about creating one small success first.
What if multiple areas feel equally urgent, though? Like everything feels heavy at the same time.
In that case, I think choosing the smallest, easiest one first can still be helpful, even if it's not the most important one technically.
Why start with the easiest instead of the most important?
Because completing something, anything, creates a feeling of capability that carries over into harder tasks.
So it's less about logical priority and more about building emotional momentum first.
Exactly that. Confidence itself becomes a resource you can use for the next challenge.
That's such a practical way to think about it, rather than trying to solve everything perfectly and logically.
Right. Perfect logical planning often leads to more overthinking than actual action.
Okay, what about people who genuinely don't know what's wrong? Like they feel something is off but can't identify exactly what needs fixing.
Oh, that's such a common experience too. A vague sense that something isn't right without a clear target.
How would someone even start addressing something that unclear?
I think journaling can really help here, honestly. Just writing freely about how different areas of life feel.
Like exploring each area on paper without trying to solve anything yet.
Exactly. Just observing first. Sometimes patterns become clear once they're written down instead of just floating in your head.
That makes sense. Thoughts feel very different once they're outside your head and visible.
Exactly. And once a pattern becomes visible, it's much easier to identify what actually needs attention.
I think talking to someone else can help too. Like an outside perspective sometimes notices things we can't see ourselves.
Definitely. We're often too close to our own situation to see it clearly.
Right, like being inside a painting instead of stepping back to look at the whole picture.
That's such a good way to describe it. Distance creates clarity sometimes.
Okay, here's another important question. How do you stay motivated once the initial excitement of fixing your life fades?
Oh, that's such an important point, because motivation naturally comes and goes over time.
Right, the first few days often feel exciting, but that feeling doesn't usually last.
I think that's exactly why systems matter more than motivation alone.
What do you mean by systems?
Like small routines that don't depend on feeling motivated every single day.
So instead of relying on emotional energy, you rely on habit and structure.
Exactly, because motivation is unreliable, but consistent small habits can continue even on low energy days.
That connects back to everything we've said about small, repeatable actions rather than big emotional pushes.
Exactly. The same theme keeps appearing throughout this whole conversation, honestly.
I think we're building towards something really important here. Let's bring it all together in our final part.
All right, so if we had to summarize everything, what would you say is the core message today?
I think it's this. Small neglected things don't stay small. They quietly grow heavier the longer we wait.
Right, and that applies to health, relationships, finances, basically every area we talked about today.
Exactly. And I think understanding that pattern is what actually creates urgency without creating panic.
We also talked about shrinking tasks down to something almost embarrassingly small, so there's no excuse not to start.
Yes, tiny actions repeated consistently matter far more than big dramatic changes that don't last.
And removing shame from the process too, remembering that today is always a new starting point.
Right. The past delay doesn't have to define what happens next.
We also talked about accountability, telling someone your goal or tracking progress visibly yourself.
Exactly. Turning private, easy-to-ignore goals into something slightly more real and trackable.
And setbacks being part of the process, not a reason to completely stop or start over from zero.
Right. Continuing instead of restarting. That small language shift really does change how people respond emotionally.
We'd also talked about choosing where to start when multiple areas feel neglected at once.
Yes, either the most stressful area or the easiest one, just to build momentum and confidence first.
And finally, systems mattering more than motivation, since motivation naturally comes and goes over time.
Exactly. Small, consistent habits carry you through the days motivation simply isn't there.
If someone listening today has something they've been avoiding for months, maybe even years, what would you want them to hear?
I would say, the size of your delay doesn't determine your ability to start now. Today still counts, no matter how long you waited.
That's such an important reminder, honestly.
And I would add, you don't need a perfect plan to begin. You just need one small, honest action today.
One small action, not a complete transformation overnight.
Exactly. Because complete transformations rarely happen overnight anyway. They happen through small, repeated choices over time.
This conversation genuinely made me think about my own sleep schedule differently, honestly.
Same here. About those old friendships I mentioned earlier. Maybe it really is time to send that message.
I think that's the whole point of this conversation, honestly. Not guilt, just gentle, honest awareness.
Exactly. Awareness followed by one small step forward whenever you're ready to take it.
So to everyone listening, whatever it is you've been quietly avoiding, remember, it's not too late to begin fixing it today.
Thanks for listening to Mia and Simon English Podcast.
Keep learning, keep growing, and take that one small step you've been avoiding.
See you in the next episode.
Bye for now.